Let's install this Solidshift Concepts GX470 chase light mount. First, open up the rear hatch. If you have a spoiler, we're going to have to do a few extra steps at the beginning. Use a pry tool to pop out the plugs that conceal the mounting fasteners for the spoiler. Underneath, you'll find a 10mm hex nut on each side that will need to be removed. Be super careful here to ensure you don't drop the nut down the body cavity. You may never find it again. Once those two nuts are released, you'll have to wiggle the spoiler up and down to release two snap clips on each side. This can be a little difficult, especially if your spoiler's never been removed before. Once the clips let go, be careful not to strain the third brake light connector. It's going to pop out of the right-hand side of the spoiler, and you'll have to release its tab before separating it. This can be a bit tricky since one hand's already supporting the spoiler. Now use your pry tool to separate the upper trim panel from the inside of your hatch. This will reveal some holes in the rear sheet metal, as well as wiring for your third brake light and a hose for your rear window washer. I already have some additional wiring run here. Next, remove the third brake light plug or the third brake light itself if you don't have a spoiler. You can release the tabs from the inside and then pry from the outside to help get this out. Be sure to remove any sealing foam and remove all debris from the surface of the body. If you're removing a third brake light from this pocket, you'll also have to unplug it. Now let's take a look at the trim panel we removed from inside the hatch. There's two tabs we'll have to trim down to get all of this to fit. The tabs that require trimming are the second from the end on each side. The end tabs and the middle tab don't require any modification. Take a rotary tool with a cutoff wheel or similar device and cut the boss of the tab down until there's no more than 3/8 of an inch protruding from the trim panel. It should look just like this when you're done. Now's the time to make sure that you have all the power you need wired to the rear of the vehicle. In this case, I have a cable that I've posi-tapped into the third brake light wiring, and two XT60 connectors that make runs all the way to the front of the vehicle to my aux beam switch panel. All of the wiring I ran to the front of the vehicle is pulled through the door grommet at the hinge of the hatch. Now, let's head to the workbench. Here are the items you're going to receive with your chase light mount. So this is the long spoiler version of the bracket in a raw stainless finish. You'll notice that when you receive it, it will only be halfway inserted into the mounting plugs here. This is intentional, and we will leave it like this until a future step. Additionally, you'll receive a bag of hardware. Now, if you were to order the adapter bracket for Baja Design's S2 lights, this is what that looks like. Includes security fasteners at each end, and it just replaces the faceplate on those lights to allow you to mount them to the chase light mount. For today's install, we're going to be using the Diode Dynamics C2 2.0 LED pods. I've got 3 units here that are joined together by 2 mini crosslink kits. On the outside, we've got flood lenses that are yellow, and then in the middle we've got the C2R, which is super cool because it has 3 functions: a high power white beam, a high power red beam, and then a low power red backlight. And with all that functionality, it's super useful for this application. I'm going to run through a quick wiring demonstration here. So here are 3 Deutsch connectors that were included with the Diode Dynamics lights. I have spliced them into some leads here, that we're going to run through the back of the chase light mount. And then we're going to attach those to some connectors that are going to plug into my vehicle wiring. So throwing the lights in the mount before you wire will help you establish the length of wire you need, so you don't come up short or too long after you install everything. When installing the Diode Dynamics C2 2.0s, I generally recommend using the center threaded hole on the side of the lights. This will align the lights well with the mount. For now, we're just going to hand tighten these, not super tight, so we have some free play in the vertical adjustment of the lights. Flipping the mount over, we'll see we've got some bulkhead pass-through holes here that allow us to run wiring into the vehicle. I highly recommend using some split wire loom and heat shrink tubing to help protect your wire bundle as it goes into the mount. We'll just check cable length here. So I just recommend getting your wires routed in such a way that they're easy to tie down with cable ties to either the bracket itself or these tie down points that are provided at the base of the chase light mount. Now you're ready to add connectors to the stripped ends of your leads here. I'll be using parallel splices, which are just little tinned copper cylinders that you crimp wires together with. These work really well if you don't want to use solder, but solder also works. When they're crimped, the connection kind of looks like this. So forms a really solid mechanical connection that's not going to get brittle and break over time. I'm just going to be splicing in these XT60 connectors because that's what I had on hand and that's what I ran in my vehicle for the wiring on the vehicle side. You can use whatever you'd like to use or whatever you have on hand, but when you're doing this, just be sure to select the appropriate wire gauge for your application. Make sure all of your power is coming from a fused source with an appropriately sized fuse, and use insulation, whether that's electrical tape or heat shrink tubing. Just make sure you keep those connections protected. One last quick note for y'all on wiring. If you do plan on running the Baja Designs S2s with the adapter bracket, you will need to depin the connectors that are attached to the leads on the back of the Bajas. Unlike the diodes, which have the connector right on the housing, which allows you to run the wiring as I've shown here, the Bajas have an integrated lead that comes out of the rear of the light and it goes straight to a 2-pin connector. The tabs on those pins inside the connector will need to be depressed in order to allow you to remove those, and then they can be routed up and through the holes in the chase light mount, and then the connectors can be added back on. Let's go ahead and attach a few cable ties to manage this wiring. Four of these sealed rubber grommets will be included with your chase light mount. You can go ahead and use these to plug any of the remaining holes in the bottom of the mount, or you can install them if you have smaller cable bundles here and cut slits in them, and that'll help keep dust and water out. Now we're ready to install this whole thing on the hatch of the truck. While holding the chase light mount assembly, make your connections to the vehicle side wiring. Begin feeding the wires and the chase light mount into the rear cutout of the hatch. As you bring the mount into position, make sure that all your wires and connectors are tucked inside the body cavity and won't be pinched. While holding the plastic portion of the mount up against the body of the vehicle, slide the main bracket up into its fully seated position. If using the long version of the main bracket, ensure that the tabs on the support gussets slide into the corresponding slots in the plastic portion. The main bracket is fully seated when all of the bolt holes align with the plastic portion of the mount. As the main bracket is slid upwards, 2 forked tabs will slide behind the sheet metal of the vehicle and keep the chase light mount from falling. Now take the 2 longest screws from the hardware bag and confirm that the sealing washer is pressed up against the head of the bolt. These screws should be inserted into the 2 outer clearance holes in the mount. The rubber portion of the sealing washers should contact the main bracket. As the mount is aligned with the hatch, you'll notice that these screws will fit through 2 of the slots in the hatch sheet metal. Add a flat washer and a locking nut to the end of each of these screws. Using a 4mm hex bit for the head of the screw and a 10mm socket for the locking nut, begin tightening. As you tighten, ensure that the chase light mount is well centered in the cutout in the hatch. If it appears that one side of the mount is tightening down and the other isn't, go ahead and back off the locking nuts, adjust the mount's position, and try again. Tighten until snug with a small wrench like this 1/4-inch ratchet handle, but don't over-tighten. When the chase light mount is fully torqued down, you should note that the foam gasket around the perimeter of the mount should be fully pinched between the body and the plastic of the mount. If there's any free play or loose parts, the gasket isn't fully sealed against the body panel. Now, take the 2 shorter M6 screws from the hardware bag and thread them through the center cover into the mounting insert assembly. Tighten fully, but don't over-torque. Once installed correctly, the chase light mount should have no free play in it and very little deflection. If you're using the long version of the main bracket, go ahead and double check those trim panels on the gussets. Make sure they're fully engaged in the plastic portion of the chase light mount and not going to fall off. Now is a good time to perform a few final checks. If you still have a rear wiper, you can go ahead and make sure that it clears the mount and the wiring for the LEDs. Some wiper blades provide less clearance than others. I'm using a Rain-X R-14-2 and it works just fine. Now would also be a great time to go ahead and check that all your lights turn on as expected. Almost done. Go ahead and snap that interior trim panel that you modified back into place. If you have a rear spoiler, go ahead and repeat the steps from earlier in reverse to reinstall. If you want to, this is also a good time to add some fresh trim tape or adhesive foam to the wing mounting area to help protect the body panels. After snugging the spoiler back down using the nuts, and then capping those holes with those plastic covers, the install is complete. I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions or run into any issues while installing this product, please don't hesitate to ask by emailing me at the address below. This product and others like it for your GX470 are available on my website, solidshiftconcepts.com, so check them out if you're interested. Otherwise, thank you for watching and have a good one.